Imagine pleading guilty to a crime, but then turning around and arguing, wait a minute, I didn't actually break the law.
Yeah, talk about a head scratcher, right?
It's a wild situation. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. United States v. Caswell Senior. This case throws a wrench into the whole idea of compassionate release and how judges make those tough calls.
Absolutely. It really gets at the heart of what accepting responsibility means, legally speaking, when someone's trying to get their sentence reduced.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty of Senior's case, can you give us a quick rundown of compassionate release in general, for those of us who aren't legal experts?
Of course. In a nutshell, it's a way for federal courts to potentially shorten someone's prison sentence. But, and this is key, it's only granted under very specific, strict circumstances. We're not talking about just a change of heart here.
Okay, so what kind of situations are we talking about?
Think serious medical conditions, like a terminal illness, or maybe someone is of advanced age and their health is declining rapidly in prison. Sometimes it's even granted because of extreme family circumstances.
Like if the person in prison is the sole caregiver for a child or a sick family member.
Exactly. It's about recognizing those truly extraordinary situations where keeping someone behind bars might not make sense anymore. Now, this particular case, it all hinges on a specific part of the law, 18 U.S.C. Section 3582C1. Sounds like legal jargon, I know.
It does sound a little intimidating.
But basically, it's the rule book for when a judge can even consider modifying a sentence.
So it's like the first hurdle, right?
Yeah.
Before compassionate release is even on the table.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Senior's case really puts those rules to the test. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Absolutely. So let's get into it. What landed Caswell Senior in this situation in the first place? Why is he asking for compassionate release?
Well, he based his entire request on what he called an extraordinary acceptance of responsibility for the crimes he committed. And this is where things get interesting.
Because he's admitted to robbing someone, but now he's saying it wasn't technically robbery.
You got it. He took a plea deal, admitted to the robbery, but now he's arguing that what he did didn't actually meet the legal definition of robbery.
So wait, is he trying to have it both ways? Saying he's sorry, but also that he didn't really do anything wrong?
It certainly seems that way, doesn't it? And that's the issue the judge in this case, Judge Halpern, had to wrestle with. Can you claim to accept responsibility while simultaneously saying, but I don't think I actually broke that law? It's a tricky territory.
It sounds like a real legal puzzle. So
Yeah.
How did the judge even begin to unravel this? What was his reasoning for denying compassionate release?
Well, to understand Judge Halpern's decision, we have to look at his ruling, which was divided into two parts. He had a very specific thought process.
All right, so two parts to this ruling. Break it down for us.
Yeah.
Okay, so two parts to this ruling. Break it down for us.
Right. So first, Senior had to prove there were what the law calls extraordinary and compelling reasons for letting him out early.
So it's not enough to just say, hey, I've changed my ways.
Exactly. The bar is set really high for compassionate release. And while the law does give judges some wiggle room to decide what counts as extraordinary and compelling, in Senior's case, Judge Halpern wasn't convinced.
I can see why that would be a tough sell, given how he's arguing both sides.
Exactly. Pleading guilty, but then saying you didn't technically break the law, it kind of undercuts the whole remorse thing,
Yeah, tough to argue you're super sorry for something you don't think you did wrong.
Right. It's a bit of a contradiction.
So that's hurdle number one. What about the second part of the judge's reasoning?
Okay, so even if Senior had cleared that first hurdle, and it's a big if, the judge also has to consider what are known as the 18 U.S.C. Section 3553A factors.
More legal jargon.
Okay.
Lay it on us. What are those exactly?
Haha, don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds. Basically, these factors are like a checklist the judge uses to make sure the punishment still fits the crime, even if someone is asking for a reduced sentence.
Okay, so it's about making sure the punishment is fair and makes sense overall.
Precisely. They want to deter future crime, protect the public, those sorts of things. And a key factor here is the seriousness of the original offense.
Right, so in Senior's case, how much time he's served so far would come into play, right?
You got it. And this is a key detail. Senior had served less than 20% of his sentence when he filed for compassionate release.
So even if the judge was moved by his claims of remorse, he'd have to balance that against the fact that Senior hadn't served very much time.
Absolutely. Judge Halpern basically said releasing him early wouldn't really achieve those bigger goals we talked about, like deterring others from committing similar crimes. It comes back to that balance, recognizing potential rehabilitation, sure, but also thinking about justice for everyone else.
Makes sense. So zooming out a bit, what does this case tell us about how judges make these really complicated decisions about compassionate release?
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about navigating this tension between acknowledging someone might be changing for the better, like genuinely accepting responsibility, while also making sure the punishment still serves its purpose. And Judge Halpern actually pointed out that Senior already got some credit for taking the plea deal. Initially, it factored into his sentence.
So it's almost like, we already gave you credit for that
Yeah.
back when you were sentenced.
Exactly. And it highlights how complex these cases are. Judges aren't just looking at legal checkboxes. They're trying to understand all the angles, the individual's actions, and the impact their decisions have on society's sense of justice as a whole.
So much to think about. Senior's case really throws a wrench in things.
It really does. And it begs the question, what does accepting responsibility really mean? Is it just saying the words, or is there a deeper level of understanding required?
Deep stuff.
Ugh.
It really makes you think, if you were the judge in this situation, what would you do? Would you prioritize Senior's claim of remorse, even with all the contradictions, or would you focus on the fact that he still has so much time left on his sentence?
Wow, yeah. That's the million-dollar question, right? It's tough. I wish I had a simple answer for you, but there's no easy solution here. It's a judgment call every single time. Judges have to juggle so many things: the law, past cases, the specific arguments being made, and ultimately they have to rely on their own understanding of justice.
So there's no magic formula, no checklist they can just follow?
Nope. It's about grappling with those gray areas. In Senior's case, it definitely throws a wrench into things, makes us confront those places where the law and what feels fair, might not perfectly line up.
It does. For someone listening who's fascinated by the legal system, what do you think is the biggest takeaway from all of this? The one thing they should remember about compassionate release?
I think it's important to remember that compassionate release isn't some kind of get-out-of-jail-free card. It's a long shot. It's a process with a really, really high bar for approval. And there's a good reason for that. We're talking about potentially shortening someone's prison sentence. It shouldn't be easy.
It's not just about saying, oh, I'm sorry, and walking free.
Right. And as we've seen, even when someone claims they're taking responsibility, there's still no guarantee. It's up to the judge to look at the whole picture, weigh everything, and decide what serves justice best.
It's definitely a balancing act. Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into United States v. Caswell Senior. It feels like we've only just scratched the surface of a much bigger conversation.
I agree. Accountability, remorse, what justice really means, those are questions we're always going to be grappling with.
Absolutely. Any final thoughts for our listeners as they continue to explore these ideas on their own?
Here's a question to ponder: the fact that there's no easy answer in Senior's case. Does that make compassionate release seem more problematic, or does it highlight why it's so essential? Think about it.
Ooh, good one. Definitely something to chew on. Well, on that note, we'll leave you to ponder that very question. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the fascinating and sometimes baffling world of compassionate release. Until next time.